the science nerd.
Science nerd.
Nerd. Haley the science nerd. Haley the science nerd.
Hi, I'm Haley, the IB science nerd. Today we're going to talk about digestion. That's right, digestion. Science. This is my shrink ray. With this device, we can see what the process of digestion looks like firsthand. And by we, I mean these guys. Next, I will shrink them down to minuscule size so that they can experience the process of digestion when I eat them. Here, this is how we can communicate. Stand up. Prepare to be shrunk. Shrinking time.
I think it's good.
Bon appetit.
The first place visited by these three amigos is the mouth.
Look at those massive choppers! How are we going to survive this crushing, grinding method of physical digestion?
The teeth are used to physically break down the food, but don't worry. You are completely protected from the grinding powers of the teeth by your protective coat. The teeth and the tongue are used in forming and swallowing the bolus. The bolus is a small, rounded mass of chewed food. Salivary glands are stimulated by the autonomic nervous system to release saliva. Saliva consists of mucus, water, and salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is an enzyme that breaks down starch into maltose, a disaccharide. The next step on our 3 Explorers journey continues past the pharynx and down the esophagus. The pharynx is the part of the throat that is located where the nasal cavity and the mouth meet. The bolus travels past the pharynx after the epiglottis covers the entrance to the trachea and into the esophagus.
Whoa, what's pushing down on this tube? Are you doing that on purpose?
No, I am not. The esophagus is a tube that moves food from the mouth to the stomach by peristalsis. Peristalsis is the involuntary constriction of the smooth muscle of the esophagus or other digestive organs, which creates wave-like motions moving the bolus downward.
So why can't we look at the respiratory system too while we're down here? Aren't the lungs right next to the stomach?
Actually, no. The entire digestive system is separated from the lungs and the other respiratory organs by the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a sheet of skeletal muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. The abdominal cavity contains all of the digestive organs except the esophagus, and the thoracic cavity contains the heart and lungs.
Ooh, I know what that is. I had heartburn once, and the doctor told me it was the cardiac sphincter not closing properly when I was laying down at night.
That's right. The cardiac sphincter is the valve between the end of the esophagus and the stomach. It remains closed except to allow the chewed food to enter the stomach. If the cardiac sphincter isn't working, acidic stomach fluid can leak back up the esophagus, causing the sensation of burning. The stomach is where the majority of the digestion begins. It is the hollow organ with a very acidic pH the esophagus empties into. The stomach contains exocrine glands in a tubular shape. The stomach tissue consists of chief and parietal cells on the internal surface. The chief cells produce pepsinogen. Parietal cells produce gastric acid, hydrochloric acid. The HCl stimulates the change of the enzyme precursor, pepsinogen, into the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin chemically digests proteins by breaking them into peptides. Gastrin is a hormone which is produced when food triggers stretch and chemoreceptors. Gastrin stimulates the release of more HCl and pepsinogen. This is part of the positive feedback system.
It's so acidic, it burns!
The final product of the digestion in the stomach is chyme. Chyme is the partially digested acidic blob of food. The chyme then travels to the small intestine through the pyloric sphincter. The first stop in the small intestine is the duodenum, and then in the following 2 sections of the small intestine, the jejunum and the ileum. Absorption starts to become the primary process occurring.
What's that?
The opening that connects the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas to the duodenum. Although the ingested food does not go through these 3 organs, they play a major role in the process of digestion, as well as other vital biological processes. The liver is the second largest organ in the body and has diverse functions. It stores carbohydrates, iron, retinol, and calciferol. It produces urea by deaminating the amino group of amino acids. It synthesizes proteins. It also synthesizes cholesterol to be shipped out to the rest of the body, as well as the lipoproteins, LDLs and HDLs, that allow the nonpolar cholesterol molecule to be transported through the bloodstream. The The liver also serves as a filter of the bloodstream. The blood that is carried through the blood vessels to the liver lobules flows past the hepatocytes, and these liver cells detoxify the blood. The liver also regulates blood sugar in cooperation with the pancreas. When blood sugar is low, it stimulates the pancreas to release glucagon. This hormone travels to the liver and stimulates the breakdown of the stored glycogen into glucose that travels into the bloodstream and raises the blood sugar. If the blood sugar is high, then the pancreas releases insulin. Insulin stimulates the uptake of glucose by the somatic cells, as well as stimulating the formation of glycogen in the liver.
What is that nasty yellow stuff coming out of the gallbladder?
That is bile! Bile is a substance produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder before being released into the duodenum. Bile is made up of water, cholesterol, bile salts, inorganic salts, bicarbonate ions, and the bile pigment bilirubin. Bile neutralizes the pH of the chyme in the small intestine and emulsifies fats.
Look, a rock! I never thought I would find a rock in the digestive system.
Those are gallstones. They are precipitates of excess cholesterol. They can reside inside the gallbladder but also block the bile duct. This extremely painful condition requires medical attention.
What else does the pancreas do?
I'm glad you asked. The pancreas releases sodium bicarbonate to work with the bile to neutralize the acidic chyme. The small intestine does not have the same thick protective lining as the stomach and cannot tolerate the extreme pH. This organ also releases many digestive enzymes into the small intestine. Pancreatic amylases break down polysaccharides into maltose and other disaccharides. Pancreatic trypsin, chymotrypsin, and pancreatic carboxypeptidase work together to break down polypeptides into amino acids. The pancreas also releases pancreatic nucleases to break down the DNA and RNA within the ingested tissues into nucleotides. Pancreatic lipase works with the bile salts to break down lipids into glycerol, fatty acids, and glycerides. Two hormones that work with the pancreas to aid digestion are secretin and CCK. Secretin's release is stimulated by the presence of acid chyme in the duodenum and triggers the release of bicarbonate from the pancreas. CCK's release is stimulated by the presence of fats and amino acids in the duodenum and triggers the release of pancreatic enzymes.
The texture of the small intestine is so weird and rough. There's so many folds.
The purpose of these folds is to increase the surface area to maximize the absorption of nutrients. Also increasing the surface area of the small intestine are millions of tiny projections called villi, and on each one of the epithelial cells of the villi, there is a brush border called the microvilli. Did you know that if the surface of the small intestine was laid flat on the ground, it would be about the size of an entire tennis court?
That's huge!
On the microvilli, there are brush border enzymes called enterokinase. Enterokinase activates the enzyme precursor trypsinogen and changes it to trypsin. Trypsin also works to activate trypsinogen through the process of positive feedback. Trypsin then changes the enzyme precursor chymotrypsinogen into the enzyme chymotrypsin, which works in the process of protein digestion in the small intestine.
Wow, that's complicated.
Indeed it is. The epithelial cells lining the villi are held together by tight junctions. These minimize the extracellular space and prevent the damaging leakage of the acid and digestive enzymes into the tissue of the small intestine. Nutrients are absorbed through the brush border of the small intestine. Most of the absorption occurs in the jejunum and ileum. The polar nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream. However, the fat molecules in the small intestine cannot do this. Before being absorbed, the fats must first be broken down. Bile salts attach to the fat globule and break down in a process called emulsification. The resulting micelles are made up of fatty acids, monoglycerides, and bile salts. Chylomicrons are lipoproteins that attach to the outside of these micelles and allow the micelles to be absorbed into the absorption lacteal.
Wow! Where are we now?
Now you have entered the large intestine. If you look down, you can see that you're standing in a pouch called the cecum. The cecum harbors symbiotic bacteria. The organ is larger in herbivores that need the extra bacteria to digest the plant material. The appendix is the small appendage coming off of the junction of the small and large intestines, and although it used to be thought of as only a vestigial structure, it is now known that it also harbors symbiotic bacteria. The large intestine, also called the colon, reabsorbs the remaining water that was not absorbed in the small intestine. The symbiotic bacteria also extracts and absorbs vitamins, especially vitamin K. Fecal matter is composed of the leftover substances, such as cellulose, that cannot be absorbed. Feces also consists of bacteria and water. The bile pigment, bilirubin, gives it its wonderful yellow-brown color. The feces is stored in the rectum before the anus. Also, a sphincter muscle excretes it.
Ew, disgusting! I'm completely covered in Woo!